Have you ever seen a powerful man who controls half a city fall to his knees because his children were too afraid to go home? On a quiet afternoon in Boston, a billionaire father found his two little kids hiding behind a tree in a public park, shaking, crying, and begging strangers not to take them back to their own house. What he discovered that day didn't just break his heart. It destroyed his world. If stories about family, sacrifice, and second chances matter to you, take a moment to subscribe. Because some stories don't just entertain, they stay with you. It started with 5 missed calls. Aelric Thornton's black Escalade cut through downtown Boston like a storm. Traffic lights didn't matter. Horns didn't matter. Nothing mattered. When you're one of the most powerful businessmen on the East Coast, people usually move out of your way. But that afternoon, power meant nothing. 5 missed calls from his children's school. And the woman who was supposed to pick them up, his mother-in-law, Genevieve, wasn't answering her phone. Then his security chief, Barrett, called. His voice was tight. "Sir, we found them. Boston Common. Near the old oak trees." Aelric exhaled hard. Relief washed over him. But Barrett wasn't finished. "There's a problem." A pause. "The kids won't come with us. They're hiding. They're terrified, and when they saw the car, they screamed." Aelric didn't ask another question. He stopped the SUV before it even reached the curb and ran. The sound hit him before the sight did. Crying. Not the normal crying of tired children. This was fear. Raw and desperate. Then he saw them. His 4-year-old son, Asher, stood pressed against the trunk of a massive oak tree like a tiny shield. His small arms were stretched wide, protecting his little sister. 3-year-old Millie clung behind him, shaking so hard her whole body trembled. One hand gripped her stuffed bear. The other held tight to her brother's shirt. And kneeling in front of them was Josie, the new housekeeper, 27 years old. From a poor family in West Virginia, hired just 2 months ago. She spoke softly, her voice calm and warm. "It's okay. I'm right here. Nobody's going to hurt you." Aelric slowed his steps. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Because when Asher saw his father, he didn't run toward him. He froze. His eyes were full of doubt. And that look hit Aelric harder than any business loss, any threat, any enemy he'd ever faced. Behind him, heels clicked across the grass. Genevieve arrived, breathless but composed, her designer handbag still hanging perfectly from her arm. "There they are," she said sharply. "This has been a ridiculous afternoon." But Josie stood up. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes were steady. "Mr. Thornton, the children are afraid to go home." The park went quiet. Genevieve let out a short, cold laugh. "Oh, please. They're children. They need discipline. This girl has been filling their heads with nonsense since she got here." She turned to Aelric, her tone wounded and dramatic. "I left my entire life to move into your house after Catherine passed. I've cared for these children every day. And now a maid who's been here 2 months is accusing me." Josie didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She simply reached into Millie's pocket and pulled out a small digital recorder. "I gave this to her," Josie said quietly, "so the truth could be heard." She handed it to Aelric. Then she looked at Genevieve. "They're not afraid of strangers," Josie whispered. "They're afraid of her." For a long moment, Aelric said nothing. The same silence he used in boardrooms before making decisions worth millions. The same silence that made powerful men nervous. Finally, he looked at Genevieve. "If there's anything on this recording I need to know," he said quietly, "this is your chance to tell me before I press play." Genevieve blinked. Just once. "They needed structure," she said, her voice controlled but thinner now. "Children need boundaries." Aelric didn't answer. He pressed play. At first, it sounded normal. A cartoon playing in the background. Small footsteps on wooden floors. Asher's little voice talking to his sister. The peaceful sound of an ordinary afternoon in a wealthy Beacon Hill home. Then Genevieve's voice cut through. Cold. Sharp. Unrecognizable. What did I tell you about touching my things? Millie's tiny voice tried to explain. It was cut off. Then Asher spoke. Dad said nobody's allowed to hurt us. A pause. Then Genevieve answered. Your father isn't here. He's busy making money while I'm stuck with two spoiled brats. Alaric's jaw tightened. But the worst part came next. Asher's voice trembled. Mom said we're good kids. And Genevieve laughed. If your mother really loved you, she wouldn't have left you behind to be someone else's problem. The recording stopped. The park was full of life. People walking dogs, children playing, wind moving through the trees. But for Aelric, the world had gone silent. He looked up slowly. Genevieve's face had gone pale. But she didn't apologize. She didn't deny it. Instead, she said something that made the air feel colder. You should keep listening, she said quietly. You haven't heard the worst part yet. And as Aelric pressed the button again, he had no idea that what he was about to hear would change his family forever. Part 2 continues. The recording clicked back on. For a moment, there was only silence. The faint hum of the television, the soft creak of the Beacon Hill house settling the way old homes do. Then Genevieve's voice returned. Colder this time. Slower. You two will go downstairs, she said. Right now. Asher's voice came next, small but trying to be brave. Grandma, please. It's dark down there. A pause. Then Millie. Not words. Just a tiny broken cry, the kind of sound a child makes when fear is too big for language. Genevieve spoke again. You'll stay in the wine cellar until you learn how to behave. The recording cut off. Not because someone stopped it. The sound simply died, leaving behind a hollow silence that felt heavier than anything spoken before. In the park, the wind moved through the trees. Somewhere nearby, a child laughed. But around Aelric Thornton, the air felt thick and heavy, like the world itself had stepped back. He lowered the recorder slowly. He didn't look at Genevieve. He didn't look at the children. He looked at Josie. What happened after that? He asked. His voice was quiet. Not cold. Not angry. Something worse. Josie swallowed. Her hands were still trembling, but when she spoke, her voice was steady. I was upstairs cleaning that afternoon, she said. At first I thought they were playing. But the crying didn't stop. She paused, remembering. It kept going. And it sounded wrong. Alaric's jaw tightened. I followed the sound to the basement, Josie continued. The cellar door was locked. From the outside. Genevieve shifted slightly behind them, but said nothing. I knocked. I called for them. I asked Mrs. Hale to open it. Josie's eyes didn't move from Aelric. She was sitting in the living room, drinking tea. The words landed slowly, like stones. I told her they were scared, Josie said. She told me it wasn't my business. She said they needed to be taught. The park seemed quieter now. Even the distant sounds felt far away. How long? Aelric asked. 3 hours, Josie said softly. A breath caught in Alaric's chest. I stayed outside the door the whole time, she continued. I could hear them crying. Then the crying got weaker. Her voice shook. And then it stopped. Aelric closed his eyes. For a moment, the powerful businessman, the man who negotiated million-dollar deals without blinking, looked like someone struggling just to breathe. When she finally opened the door, Josie went on. Asher walked out first. He wasn't crying anymore. She paused. He just looked empty. Aelric opened his eyes. "And Millie?" he asked. Josie glanced toward the little girl, who was now clinging to his leg, her face buried against him. "She wouldn't let go of her brother," Josie said. She didn't speak the rest of the night. A long silence settled between them. Then Aelric asked the question that mattered most. "How many times?" Josie hesitated. "I don't know exactly," she admitted. "But that was the third time I saw it." Her voice dropped lower. "Last week it was 3 hours because Millie spilled orange juice." The words hit harder than anything else. Orange juice. A 3-year-old child. Locked in darkness for hours. Because of a mistake every child makes. Aelric didn't speak. But something inside him shifted. Not anger. Not rage. Pain. The kind that settles deep and stays there. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked quietly. Josie lowered her eyes, then looked back up. "I tried," she said. "Every time I started to talk, you were busy. Meetings. Calls. Trips." The truth hung in the air. "And she warned me," Josie added. "She said if I told you, she'd accuse me of stealing. I'd lose my job. I'd have nothing." Her voice softened. "But last week, when I sat outside that door for 3 hours and listened to them cry, I decided I couldn't stay quiet anymore." She glanced at Millie. "That's when I gave her the recorder." Aelric didn't respond. He turned slowly toward the oak tree where his children still stood close together. He approached them carefully, step by step, like someone walking toward frightened animals. Then he knelt in the grass so his eyes were level with Asher's. "I'm here now, son," he said gently. "You can come to me." Asher didn't move right away. His small face studied his father, searching, testing. "Grandma won't take us back?" the boy whispered. Aelric swallowed. "Never," he said. "Never again." That was enough. Asher threw himself forward, wrapping his arms tightly around his father's neck. The grip was fierce, desperate, the grip of a child who had been holding fear inside for far too long. Millie pressed herself against his leg at the same time, her stuffed bear wedged between them. Then Asher leaned close to his father's ear and whispered something so quietly no one else could hear. "Grandma said, Mom left because we were bad." The words broke something. For the first time in years, Aelric Thornton felt tears run down his face. He didn't wipe them. He didn't hide them. He just held his children tighter. "That's not true," he said softly. "Your mom loved you more than anything. She didn't leave you. She was sick. And she loved you until the very end." Millie lifted her head, eyes wet. "Really?" she asked. "Really?" he whispered. Then Aelric stood slowly, both children clinging to him. He looked over at Josie. His voice was calm again. "Josie," he said, "take them to the car. Barrett's waiting." Josie nodded and stepped forward. And something happened that Aelric would never forget. He didn't have to tell the children to go. Asher released his father and immediately took Josie's hand. Millie slipped her fingers around Josie's other hand without hesitation. They walked away together across the grass. After a few steps, Asher looked back once. Just once. A silent question in his eyes. "Are you going to be okay?" Aelric gave a small nod. The boy turned forward again and kept walking. When they disappeared behind the trees, the park suddenly felt very empty. Only 3 people remained near the oak. Aelric, Declan, standing quietly several yards away, and Genevieve. She straightened her posture, gathering what was left of her dignity. "They need discipline," she said calmly. "You're too soft with them. Someone has to teach them respect. Aelric looked at her. His expression was completely still, and when he spoke, his voice was low and steady. You taught my children that their home is the most frightening place in their lives. Genevieve opened her mouth to respond, but the look in his eyes stopped her, and for the first time that afternoon, she took a step backward, because she suddenly realized something. This wasn't a conversation anymore, and whatever came next, there would be no turning back. Genevieve steadied herself, her fingers tightening around the handle of her designer bag. For a woman who had spent her entire life moving through wealthy rooms, controlling conversations, managing appearances, she understood power when she saw it. And right now, the power standing in front of her was quiet, controlled, final. You're overreacting, she said, her voice calm but thinner than before. Children exaggerate. They cry over everything. If you let them grow up without discipline, they'll become weak. Aelric didn't raise his voice. He didn't step closer. But there was something in the way he stood, solid, unmoving, that made the air between them feel heavy. You didn't discipline them, he said slowly. You frightened them. Genevieve lifted her chin. I did what their mother would have wanted. The words landed like a slap. For the first time, something sharp moved behind Alaric's eyes. You don't get to speak for Catherine, he said quietly. A long silence followed. People were still walking through the park. A couple pushed a stroller past them. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked. But inside that small space beneath the oak tree, it felt like the world had narrowed to two people and a truth that could no longer be hidden. Genevieve tried one last time. I gave up my life to help you, she said. I left my home, my friends, everything. Those children needed structure. You're never there. You're always reminding them that money fixes everything. Aelric held her gaze. You locked my 3-year-old daughter in a dark cellar for 3 hours, he said. Genevieve's lips pressed together. That's not structure, he continued. That's cruelty. She opened her mouth, but no words came. And then Aelric spoke again, his voice even quieter. You used their mother's memory to hurt them. That was the sentence that broke through whatever confidence she had left. Because even Genevieve knew that line had been crossed. For the first time, her eyes dropped. I never meant to harm them, she said, softer now. I thought they needed to be tough. The world isn't gentle. Alaric's answer came without hesitation. The world isn't gentle, he said. That's why home has to be. Another silence. Declan stood behind them, watching, his expression unreadable. He had seen his boss make decisions that changed people's lives. He recognized the tone. This wasn't anger. This was judgment. You'll pack your things tonight, Aelric said. Genevieve looked up sharply. And you'll leave my house. Her face went pale. You can't be serious. I am. I'm their grandmother. And I'm their father. The words were simple, but there was no space left for argument. You won't see them again, Aelric continued. Not until I decide it's safe. Genevieve took a step back, her heels sinking slightly into the grass. You're making a mistake, she said. You can't raise them alone. You don't even know how. You run businesses. You run the city. But children... She shook her head. They need someone like me. Aelric thought of Asher's eyes, of Millie shaking against that tree, of the way both of them had taken Josie's hands without hesitation. They already have someone they trust, he said. Genevieve's expression hardened again. That girl? She asked, disbelief in her voice. She's poor. She's inexperienced. She's a housekeeper from nowhere. You're choosing her over family. Aelric didn't answer right away. because the truth was heavier than the question. She chose them, he said finally, when it mattered. Genevieve stared at him, and in that moment, she understood something she hadn't expected. This decision wasn't emotional. It was permanent. You'll regret this, she said quietly. Aelric took one step forward. Not threatening. Not aggressive. Just enough for her to feel the certainty in him. If you try to come near my children without my permission, he said calmly, I'll take that recording to the authorities. Her breath caught. And if you try anything else, he paused. The silence that followed said more than words ever could. Genevieve knew her son-in-law. She knew the reach of his influence. She knew what he was capable of when someone threatened his family. For the first time since this conversation began, she had nothing left to say. Her shoulders lowered slightly. The fight was gone. Without another word, she turned and walked away across the grass. Her steps were steady. Her posture straight. Even now, she carried her dignity like armor. But she didn't look back. Aelric stood there for a long time after she disappeared down the path. The sun was beginning to lower, casting long shadows across the park. Declan stepped closer. Want me to handle the move? He asked quietly. Aelric nodded once. Tonight, he said. Declan gave a short nod and walked away to make the visibly quiet calls that would set things in motion. Aelric remained under the oak tree for another moment. Just breathing. Just standing. Because for the first time since Catherine died, the house waiting for him wasn't going to be the same. That evening, the black Escalade pulled up in front of the Beacon Hill mansion as the sky turned orange with sunset. 2 large suitcases were already sitting neatly on the front steps. Declan worked fast. Inside, the house felt different. Quieter. He stepped through the front door with Asher's small hand in his right and Millie resting against his left shoulder. Josie walked beside them, close but careful, never stepping ahead, never assuming her place. In the living room, Genevieve stood waiting. She had changed clothes. Her hair was neat again. Her posture straight. If someone walked in at that moment, they might have thought she was simply preparing for a trip. I hope someday you'll understand, she said calmly. Everything I did was for them. Aelric didn't answer. Some moments are too heavy for words. Then something unexpected happened. Millie slipped down from her father's arms. She walked slowly across the room. Her small steps made soft sounds against the wooden floor. She stopped right in front of Genevieve. The little girl looked up, her eyes still red from crying earlier. And in the clear, honest voice only a child can have, she asked, "Grandma, why are you so mean to us?" The room went completely still. Genevieve blinked. Once. Then again. The question wasn't angry. It wasn't accusing. It was confused, hurt, and real. For the first time all day, something cracked in Genevieve's expression. Her lips trembled slightly. "You're good children," she whispered. Her voice broke on the last word. Then she picked up her suitcases, walked past them, and left without looking back. The front door closed softly behind her. The sound echoed through the quiet house. Asher and Millie stood there, watching the empty space where she had been. Neither of them cried. Millie just reached for her father's hand, and held on. But that night, long after the house had gone quiet, after the lights were turned off, after the children were finally asleep, Aelric lay awake, staring at the ceiling, because something Josie had said earlier kept repeating in his mind. The third time I saw it, and a question he hadn't asked yet began to grow heavier in the dark. If that was the third time she saw it, how many times had it happened when no one was watching? Sleep did not come easily that night. The Beacon Hill house was quiet, the kind of quiet that usually meant peace. But for Aelric, The silence felt heavy, filled with things he had not seen, moments he had missed, fears his children had carried alone while he was busy building an empire. He turned his head slightly. Millie was asleep in the middle of the bed, her thumb resting near her mouth, Mr. Bear tucked tightly under her arm. Even in sleep, her small body was curled inward, like she was still protecting herself from something. On his other side, Asher lay close, his back pressed lightly against his father's arm. Not clinging, not crying, just making sure he was there. Aelric stared at the ceiling for a long time. He had negotiated with powerful men. He had taken risks that could cost millions. He had faced threats without hesitation. But this was different. Because you couldn't fix a child's fear with money. And you couldn't undo months of darkness overnight. Around 2 in the morning, Millie suddenly jerked awake. Her small body stiffened, and then she screamed, "Daddy! She's coming back!" Aelric was already sitting up before the last word left her mouth. The bedside lamp flooded the room with warm light. Millie was shaking, her eyes wide but unfocused, her hands gripping at the air like she was trying to push something away. "She's gone, sweetheart," he said softly, pulling her into his arms. "She's gone. Nobody's coming back." Millie buried her face into his shoulder. "But what if she comes when you're sleeping?" she whispered. The question hit deeper than the fear. Aelric held her tighter. "Then I'll wake up," he said. "I'll always wake up." It took a long time for her breathing to slow. Asher hadn't said a word during any of it. But when Millie finally settled, the boy quietly shifted closer and placed his small hand on his father's arm. Not asking for comfort. Just making sure he was there too. The next morning, Aelric cancelled his entire schedule. Declan didn't argue. He didn't ask questions. He only said, "Understood," and handled the calls. For the first time in years, Aelric stayed home. And that's when he realized something that money and power had hidden from him. He didn't actually know his children's routine. He didn't know what Asher liked for breakfast. He didn't know which cup Millie preferred. He didn't know how long it took her to eat, or that she needed someone sitting beside her or she would stop halfway. Josie moved through the kitchen quietly, naturally, without drawing attention to herself. She didn't act like she was in charge. But somehow, everything flowed around her. "Millie likes her toast cut into little squares," she said gently. "And Asher won't drink milk if it's cold." Aelric nodded, absorbing every small detail like it was information from a business briefing. Because now he understood. These small things were the real work of a family. Not the house. Not the money. The attention. Later that afternoon, he found Josie in the playroom, sitting cross-legged on the floor. Millie was beside her, holding a crayon. Asher was building a tower with blocks nearby. Josie wasn't directing them. She was just there. Present. When Millie dropped the crayon and crawled into her lap without hesitation, something tightened in Alaric's chest. Children didn't trust because of titles. They trusted because of safety. Because of consistency. Because someone showed up every day. That evening, after the children were asleep, Aelric stood in the doorway of the kitchen. Josie was washing dishes. Her sleeves were rolled up. Her hair had slipped loose from its tie. She looked tired, but peaceful. "Josie," he said. She turned immediately. "Yes, sir." He hesitated, then asked the question that had been growing in him all day. "Why didn't you leave?" She frowned slightly. "Leave?" "You knew what was happening," he said. "You were threatened. You could have quit. Found another job." Josie dried her hands slowly. For a moment, she didn't answer. Then she leaned lightly against the counter. "My mom died when I was 6, she said quietly. Aelric didn't interrupt. "My dad didn't handle it well. He drank. He got angry. My brother and I used to hide in the closet at night and wait for the house to get quiet." Her voice stayed steady, but her eyes had gone somewhere far away. "When I saw Asher standing in front of his sister like that in the park, I knew that look." She swallowed. "I knew what it feels like when home isn't safe." A long silence filled the kitchen. "I couldn't leave," she finished simply, "because no one came for us." The words settled deep. Aelric looked at her differently after that. Not as an employee. Not as a housekeeper from a poor town trying to keep a job in a rich man's house. But as someone who understood pain, and chose to protect anyway. That night, for the first time since Catherine died, the house didn't feel empty. It still hurt. It still carried shadows. But there was something else now. Warmth. 3 days later, Dr. Everett's office in Cambridge was filled with quiet sunlight. The room didn't look like a clinic. It looked like a place where children were allowed to breathe. Toys on low shelves. Soft chairs. Gentle colors. Aelric sat in the waiting room while Josie stayed inside with the children. When the session ended, Asher ran out first. He didn't cling. He didn't look frightened. Just tired. Millie followed, holding a small drawing. Dr. Everett asked to speak with Aelric alone. "They've been through trauma," she said plainly. "Fear inside the home changes a child's sense of safety." He nodded. "Will they recover?" "Yes," she said. "Children are resilient. But they need stability, consistency, and a strong emotional anchor." She paused. "They already have one." Aelric didn't ask who she meant. He already knew. That night, he stood outside the children's rooms for a long time, listening to their breathing. When he finally turned away, he saw Josie in the hallway. She had just come from checking on them too. They stood there for a quiet moment. Two adults. Same responsibility. Same unspoken worry. Same hope. And for the first time, Aelric realized something he hadn't expected. This house wasn't just healing the children. It was changing him. But the calm didn't last long. Because the following week, on an ordinary afternoon while the children were playing in the backyard, Alaric's phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. He almost ignored it. But something made him answer. The woman on the other end sounded nervous. "Mr. Thornton, my name is Paige Holbrook." A pause. "I used to work for Genevieve." Aelric straightened. "I quit last week," she continued quietly, "because of what she's planning to do to your family." Aelric didn't answer right away. He stepped farther away from the backyard, moving toward the far end of the patio where the children's laughter became softer, distant. "What is she planning?" he asked quietly. On the other end of the line, Paige hesitated. When she spoke again, her voice was lower. "Not over the phone," she said. "I have documents. Emails. Messages." I didn't want to believe it at first, but she's been preparing something for weeks. Alaric's expression didn't change, but his hand tightened slightly around the phone. "Where?" he asked. They met the next afternoon in a small cafe in Back Bay. It was the kind of place people chose for private conversations. Dim lighting. Quiet corners. No one paying attention to anyone else. Paige Holbrook looked younger than her voice had sounded. Late 20s. Simple clothes. No makeup. Her hands stayed wrapped around her coffee cup like she was trying to steady herself. She placed a thick folder on the table. "I worked for Mrs. Hale for 6 months," she began. "At first, I thought she was just upset about being asked to leave your house." She opened the folder. But she didn't let it go. Inside were printed emails, receipts, screenshots. "She hired 2 private investigators," Paige continued. "Their job was to dig into your life. Everything. Business, personal history, travel, employees. Anything that could be used against you. Aelric flipped through the pages slowly. And what did they find? He asked. Paige let out a small breath. Nothing, she said. Your personal life is clean. Too clean. She actually made them run the search twice because she didn't believe it. There was a strange irony in that. The man who controlled half of Boston's underground economy had a cleaner private record than most executives in the financial district. When she couldn't find anything, Paige went on. She changed tactics. She slid another set of papers across the table. These are drafts of fabricated complaints. One claims substance abuse. Another claims unsafe living conditions. She even contacted a woman willing to pose as a former employee and accuse you of misconduct. Alaric's face remained still. But inside, something cold settled. And that's not the worst part, Paige said quietly. She hesitated before continuing. She said the only way to really hurt you was through the children. The cafe noise faded around him. What does that mean? He asked. Paige swallowed. She's preparing to file an anonymous report with Child Protective Services. A pause. Neglect. Unsafe environment. Emotional instability. She's building a case designed to trigger an emergency investigation. Aelric didn't move for several seconds. He had faced threats before. Business rivals. Lawsuits. Investigations. But this was different. Because this wasn't about him. This was about the two small people who had only just begun to feel safe again. Why are you telling me this? He asked finally. Paige looked up, and for the first time her voice didn't shake. Because I saw the photos. She opened the folder to a page filled with images gathered during the investigation. Asher in a school uniform. Millie holding a crayon drawing. Both of them smiling. They don't look like children in danger, Paige said. They look loved. She pushed the folder toward him. I couldn't help her do this. Aelric closed the file slowly. Thank you, he said. Then he placed a card on the table. If she contacts you again, call this number. Paige looked down at the card. Declan's name. On the drive back to Beacon Hill, Aelric made one call. Declan, he said. Yes, boss. I need every piece of information you can gather on Genevieve's activities over the last 3 months. There was no hesitation. Understood. And get the best family attorney in Boston. I want everything documented. Every message. Every payment. Every contact she's made. Already on it, Declan replied. Aelric ended the call and stared out the window. He wasn't afraid. But he was angry. Not the loud kind. The quiet kind that comes when someone tries to use children as a weapon. 2 weeks later, the knock came. It was mid-morning. Asher was at the kitchen table practicing his letters. Millie sat beside him, coloring carefully inside the lines of a drawing she planned to tape to the refrigerator. The doorbell rang. Barrett checked the camera, then looked back at Aelric. A state worker, he said. Child Protective Services. Aelric took a slow breath. He had known this was coming. He just hadn't expected it so soon. The woman at the door introduced herself as Constance Riggs. Professional. Come. No hostility in her voice. Mr. Thornton, she said, we received an anonymous report regarding concerns about your children's safety and living conditions. She paused, almost apologetic. I'll need to conduct a home assessment. Aelric stepped aside. Of course, he said. Please come in. For the next 3 hours, she moved through the house. Bedrooms. Kitchen. Playroom. Backyard. She checked the refrigerator. Opened cabinets. Observed routines. She spoke with the children alone. Aelric stayed out of sight but close enough to hear. Asher talked about school, about reading, about how his dad burned toast but tried anyway. Millie said less. But when asked who lived in her house, she ran to the refrigerator and brought back a drawing. 4 stick figures holding hands. "This is my family," she said. She pointed to the tallest one. "That's Daddy." Then she pointed to the woman beside him. "That's Mommy Josie." Riggs looked at the drawing for a long moment. Later, she interviewed Josie and Aelric separately. Daily schedules, meals, therapy sessions, bedtime routines. Everything matched. Because none of it was rehearsed. It was simply their life. When the inspection finally ended, Riggs closed her folder and sat across from Aelric in the living room. "I didn't find any evidence supporting the report," she said. Relief moved through him, but he stayed still. "Your children are healthy. The home is stable. And both you and Miss Whitfield show strong emotional support." She stood, then paused. "There's one thing you should know." Her tone changed slightly. "The person who filed this report knows your household very well. The details were too specific." Alaric's expression hardened. "In my experience," Riggs added gently, "people who make reports like this don't stop after one attempt." She left a few minutes later. The front door closed quietly. The house returned to its normal calm. But Aelric stood in the hallway for a long moment, staring at nothing. Then he took out his phone. "Declan," he said. "Yes. She's escalating." There was a short pause on the other end. Then Declan's voice came back, calm and steady. "Then it's time we end this." And later that evening, while the children slept peacefully upstairs, an envelope was placed on Genevieve's doorstep. Inside was a complete file. Every email, every payment, every investigator she had hired, every forged document she had created. And on the last page, written in black ink, were only 6 words. "This is your final warning. There won't be another." Across town, when Genevieve opened the envelope and began to read, her hands started to shake. Because for the first time since she had been forced out of the Beacon Hill house, she realized something. The man she was fighting wasn't reacting anymore. He was preparing. And she didn't know what he would do next. For the next few weeks, the Beacon Hill house grew quieter. Not the tense kind of quiet that comes before something breaks. A different quiet. The kind that slowly returns when a storm has passed but the air is still learning how to settle. Genevieve didn't call. There were no more reports. No investigators. No messages through lawyers. She disappeared from their lives the same way she had left the house that night, without looking back. But peace, Aelric was learning, didn't mean everything was healed. Some wounds didn't show on the outside. They lived in small moments, in habits, in fears that came back when the lights went off. The second night after the investigation, Millie woke up screaming again. Not loud this time. Just a frightened cry, like she was trying not to make too much noise. Aelric reached her before she even opened her eyes. "I'm here," he whispered, lifting her into his arms. She clung to his shirt. "Is the door locked?" she asked. "Yes." "All the doors?" "Yes." She rested her head against his shoulder but didn't let go. That night, he checked every lock twice. Not because the house wasn't safe. Because she needed to know it was. Asher was different. He didn't wake up crying. He didn't ask questions. But one morning, while Aelric was helping him tie his shoes, the boy said quietly, "Dad, if someone comes to take us, will you tell them no?" Aelric froze for a second. Then he knelt so they were eye level. "No one is taking you anywhere," he said. Asher searched his face, then nodded once, like he had made a decision to believe him. The following days settled into a routine. Breakfast together. Therapy twice a week. Evenings in the playroom. And always, Josie at the center of it all. She moved through the house quietly, but her presence was everywhere. Warm milk before bed. A song Millie asked for every night. The exact way Asher liked his homework checked. She never tried to take Catherine's place. She never spoke about being more than a caretaker. But slowly, the children stopped asking where she was. Because she was always there. One evening, Aelric passed Millie's room and paused. Josie was sitting on the edge of the bed, brushing Millie's hair. The little girl leaned back against her like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Again," Millie said sleepily. Josie smiled and began the lullaby Catherine used to sing. Aelric stood in the hallway, listening. He hadn't heard that song in over a year. For a moment, the memory hit him so hard he had to hold the doorframe. Not because it hurt. Because it didn't hurt the way he expected. It felt like something was being carried for him. Later that night, after the children were asleep, he found Josie in the kitchen reviewing the therapy exercises Dr. Everett had suggested. She looked up quickly when he entered. "Did Millie fall asleep okay?" he asked. "Yes," Josie said. "She asked for you twice, but she didn't cry." Aelric nodded. Then he leaned against the counter, watching her for a moment. "You learned Catherine's songs," he said. Josie hesitated. "I found an old playlist on the tablet," she admitted. "I thought it might help them feel connected to her." A long silence followed. "You don't have to do all this," he said quietly. Josie looked at him. "I know," she said. And the way she said it made something shift in the room. Because she wasn't doing it for a job. She was doing it because she loved them. 3 months passed. The changes were small, but they mattered. Millie started drawing again. Bright colors. Sun. Flowers. Families holding hands. The refrigerator filled with her pictures. Asher stopped watching the doors. He began arguing about bedtime again. Complaining about vegetables. Acting like a normal 5-year-old. Dr. Everett called their progress remarkable. And for the first time, Aelric allowed himself to believe the worst was behind them. Until one ordinary Tuesday afternoon. The children were in the backyard. Josie sat at the small table helping Millie paint a butterfly with watercolors. Asher was chasing a ball across the grass. Aelric watched from the patio, a rare quiet moment between calls. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost ignored it. But something made him answer. "Mr. Thornton?" a woman's voice said. Young. Nervous. "My name is Paige Holbrook." Aelric straightened slightly. "We spoke before," she continued. "I was Genevieve's assistant." He walked farther from the yard, his voice lowering. "What is it?" There was a pause. "I thought it was over," Paige said. "After the warning. After she stopped the investigation." Her voice shook. But it wasn't. Alaric's grip tightened on the phone. "What did she do?" "She didn't fight you directly," Paige said. "She changed strategy." A long silence. Then the words came out in a rush. "She's been building a custody case." The world seemed to narrow around him. "How?" he asked. "She's been collecting statements," Paige said. "Private investigators again. Former employees. Anyone willing to talk." Another pause. "And she's telling them you're unstable. Dangerous. That your business connections make the home unsafe for children." Aelric didn't move. "Do you understand what she's trying to do?" Paige asked quietly. He did. If someone connected his legitimate life to the darker parts of his empire, it wouldn't matter how good a father he was. It wouldn't matter how safe the house felt. The court wouldn't see the man who burned toast for his kids. They would see power, influence, risk. They'll remove the children during the investigation, Paige whispered. That's her goal. In the backyard, Millie laughed as blue paint splashed onto her hand. Josie wiped it gently with a towel. Asher ran past them, shouting something about winning. Normal, safe, happy. And suddenly, Aelric understood what Genevieve had finally realized. If she couldn't control the children through fear, she would take them away legally. He spoke slowly. How far has she gotten? Paige hesitated. Far enough, she said. Then her voice dropped to a whisper. The hearing request was filed this morning. The laughter from the backyard drifted toward him. And for the first time since the day under the oak tree, Aelric felt the ground shift beneath his feet again. Because this time, the threat wasn't coming through the front door. It was coming through the system. And he didn't know if his power could stop it. For a long moment, Aelric stood on the patio with the phone still in his hand. The children's laughter drifted toward him, light and careless, the sound of a life that had only just begun to feel safe again. Inside him, something tightened. "Send me everything you have," he said quietly. "I already did," Paige replied. "Check your email." And, "Mr. Thornton." "Yes. I'm sorry." The call ended. Aelric didn't move right away. Then he walked back toward the yard. Millie looked up first, her hands covered in blue paint. "Daddy, look. It's a butterfly." Josie smiled softly beside her. Asher ran past them, chasing the ball again, his energy bright and loud. For a moment, Aelric forced himself to breathe. Because whatever happened next, these moments mattered. That night, Declan and the attorney worked until after midnight. The evidence Paige had provided was powerful. Payments, messages, draft statements, proof that Genevieve had attempted to manipulate investigations and fabricate claims. But there was still risk. If the court opened a full inquiry into Alaric's business life, the attention alone could damage everything. More importantly, it could frighten the children again. The hearing was scheduled for the following week. The morning of the hearing, the courthouse felt colder than any boardroom Aelric had ever walked into. Genevieve was already there. She stood near her attorney, dressed perfectly, posture straight, expression calm. When she saw Aelric, she didn't smile. But her eyes held the same determination. This wasn't about anger anymore. This was about control. Inside the courtroom, the judge listened quietly as Genevieve's attorney spoke first. Concerns about stability. Questions about the environment. Suggestions that a powerful businessman with complex connections might not be the safest guardian. Then Alaric's attorney presented their evidence. The fabricated reports. The hired investigators. The attempted manipulation of Child Protective Services. The room grew quieter with every document placed before the judge. Genevieve's composure began to crack. But the turning point came from someone unexpected. Paige testified. Her voice trembled at first, but she didn't look away. She didn't want the children safe, Paige said. She wanted control. When she couldn't get it, she decided to take them away. The judge listened without interruption. Then Dr. Everett spoke. She described the children's progress, their trauma, their recovery. The stability in their current home, she said, is the reason they're healing. Finally, the judge turned to Genevieve. "Do you have anything to add?" For the first time, the older woman looked smaller. Not weak. Just tired. "I love them," she said quietly. The room went still. "I lost my daughter," she continued. "And after she died, everything felt out of control. I thought if I could manage the children, I could hold on to something." Her voice shook. "I didn't realize I was hurting them. A long silence followed. Then the judge spoke. The court finds no evidence of neglect or instability in Mr. Thornton's home. The petition is denied. Genevieve closed her eyes. And based on the evidence presented, the judge continued, a restraining order is granted. Any future attempts to interfere with the children's custody will result in legal consequences. The sound of the gavel was quiet, but it ended everything. Outside the courthouse, Genevieve stood alone near the steps. Aelric hesitated before walking toward her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she said softly, "I didn't mean for it to become this." "I know," he answered. She looked older than she had weeks ago. "Will I ever see them again?" she asked. Aelric thought about Asher's fear, Millie's nightmares, the dark cellar. Then he thought about something else. Healing didn't come from punishment alone. "It won't be soon," he said. "But if you get help, if you change, maybe someday." Genevieve nodded once. Tears slipped down her face, but she didn't wipe them. "Tell them," she whispered, "that I do love them." Then she turned and walked away. This time, there was no fight left in her. When Aelric returned home that evening, the children ran to him the moment he stepped inside. "Did you win?" Asher asked seriously. Aelric knelt down. "We're staying together," he said. That was all the boy needed. He threw his arms around his father's neck. Millie hugged Josie's leg, smiling. That night, the house felt lighter. Weeks passed. Then months. The nightmares faded. Millie stopped asking if the doors were locked. Asher stopped watching the windows. One evening, while Josie was helping Millie brush her hair, the little girl said softly, "Thank you, Mom." The brush stopped. Josie froze. "Mom?" she whispered. Millie turned and hugged her. "You take care of us like Mom in heaven did." Tears filled Josie's eyes. Across the doorway, Aelric stood quietly, watching. And in that moment, he understood something deeper than any business lesson life had ever taught him. Family isn't built by money. It isn't built by power. It isn't even built by blood. It's built by the people who stay, who protect, who love when it would be easier to walk away. Years later, on a quiet night, the kitchen was messy with spilled cocoa and scattered marshmallows. It was 2 a.m. Millie had woken up thirsty. Asher had declared that if everyone was awake, then it was clearly time for hot chocolate. Josie stood at the stove, laughing as the milk almost boiled over. Aelric leaned against the counter, watching his family. The house that had once been silent. The children who had once been afraid to go home. The woman who had once walked in wearing a simple blue uniform and changed everything. And that was the moment he realized the truth. The most powerful thing in the world isn't money, or status, or control. It's the quiet courage of someone who chooses to love a child who isn't theirs, and never lets go. Millie climbed into his arms. Asher leaned against Josie. And in that messy kitchen, at 2 a.m, surrounded by laughter and chocolate and warmth, Aelric knew something with absolute certainty. They weren't just safe. They were home. Because in the end, love doesn't come from wealth or pride. It comes from presence. From patience. From choosing kindness again and again, even when life gives you every reason not to. And sometimes, the strongest families aren't the ones we're born into. They're the ones we build with courage, faith, and love. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe. And tell us in the comments, which region of the world are you watching from?